Hey, what's up bikers? Pierce here with Electric Bike Report, and today we've got the RadMini 4. Let's get this thing up to scale. Now, what's so cool about the RadMini 4? There's a few main things that I really like. One, it fits a wide range of riders. Whether you're around 5 feet tall or 6 feet tall, you're going to be able to fit this bike comfortably. Not only that, it's very easy to store thanks to its folding capabilities. If you're camping or live in a very condensed area, you can put this baby in the closet or the back of the camper and kind of forget it's there from how small it folds down. On top of that, it has a lot of power in that rear hub motor that's designed specifically for this bike. And overall, it adds up to a very fun experience and it becomes a very versatile bike overall. I'm looking forward to showing you the nitty-gritty of what the Rad Power Bikes RadMini 4 is all about, so we'll see you out there. So before we get out there on the trail today, I'm gonna go over all the specs that you get on the Rad Power Bikes RadMini 4 to really show what you get for the price that you pay. We're going to start off with those electrical components first. Powering the bike is a 48 volt, 14 amp hour battery, and that's connected to our 750 watt brushless rear hub motor capable of 80 Newton meters of torque. Between those two is your controller that Rad Power Bikes seems to do a very good job of tuning relative to the bikes. What I mean by that is this controller is specific to the RadMini, while say the Rad Rover 5s is tuned specifically to that. Where you're going to be able to see all of this is on your display here. This display is a little over 3 inches wide, and it's showing you everything that you need to see when you're out there riding. One thing Rad Power Bikes does with their display that I really like is they show you your wattage. That way you can see how much the bike is doing in each assistance level and when you're potentially pushing the bike too soft or too hard. Similar to a power meter if you're a road cyclist, this is going to be a great way to moderate the power output to make sure that you get to your destination with a little charge left and at the speed that you were intending initially. When we're getting on to our other components, with your drivetrain here, you have a Shimano Altus 7-speed drivetrain. I find these 7 gears are plenty for this bike's intended use. When you're hooked up to the 750 watt motor with that 80 Newton meters of torque, the granny gear is plenty easy and your hardest gear is plenty hard to sprint the bike along. That's connected to a Shimano thumb shifter that's over the top of the bar, and overall it does a good job. Personal preference for me is having the shifter underneath the bar. I wouldn't really see the over the bar shifter as a con by any means, but for my ergonomics and convenience, I do like to have that underneath the bar just so I don't really have to put my thumb up and over the grip. Next to that, you have a grip twist throttle that twists about halfway, and there's a slight gap between the grip and the throttle. While that might not seem like a lot, that little gap keeps a lot of people from accidentally twisting the throttle when getting on or off the bike. Because of that, this bike is a little safer than some of its competitors, and it's those fine details that really add up with the Rad Power Bikes. Holding it all together is a 6061 alloy frame that's foldable. You'll notice this clamp in the middle here. You'll notice it visually, but when you're riding, you can't even tell it's there, and you cannot even tell that it's a foldable bike in the first place. I can't tell you how many foldable e-bikes I've been on where I think, is this thing gonna fall apart on me? Is this thing holding together like it should? That's not the case at all with this bike. It feels like one piece when you're riding it, yet it still folds down when you're ready to store it away. Up front here, you have an 80mm suspension fork with a preload adjustment and lockout. Because of that, you're going to be able to tune your suspension relative to where you're riding. If you're taking your RadMini 4 out on a camping trip, open that suspension fork up and eat up the gravel roads that you're exploring on. If you're taking this on a paved trail, lock it out and get maximum pedal efficiency and rolling speeds. Your tires here are one of my favorite components of this bike that they stocked. They're the CST Big Boat 20-inch by 3-inch wide tires. The reason I like these tires so much is because the tread pattern is so fast rolling, yet it's meaty enough that I'm able to get low enough on corners that I feel like I'm not going to slide out when I do so. These tires have proved to be relatively puncture resistant so far, and I'd like to see a lot more fat tire e-bikes go with the faster rolling tread pattern. We see so many with the big knobby tires, and while those are great for some instances, overall, those tires are pretty slow, and these tires seem to still do a decent job off-road. I think they're the right tire for the job overall. Not to mention, they have this reflective strip here, combined with the reflectors on the pedal, your front and rear headlights, and your reflector here. You're going to be visible to others in pretty much any condition. If you're planning on doing a lot of night riding, I would definitely advise another light. This front and rear light here are decently bright, but they're not going to really give you a wide array of view in those low light conditions. Other than that, those pedals that I mentioned are foldable. They're made by Wellgo, and it's just one of those other foldable components that is on this bike. It just adds to the overall experience of this thing being easy to store away, and that's very much appreciated, especially for someone like me that doesn't have a lot of space to store their stuff. Your contact points are your grips and your saddle here. This saddle, I don't know how I feel about it, to be honest, and it very well could just be my butt anatomy, but I feel like I'm sitting on top of the saddle versus meshing with it properly, and it just feels kind of like I'm sitting on 2 tennis balls on my sit bones. That very well could just be my bony butt, but it is something I noticed, and it is something worth mentioning. On that same topic, saddles are very easy to replace, and Rad Power Bikes has a hefty selection on their website. As far as the grips go here, the grips are just fine. It's a nice touch to the overall aesthetics of the bike, and it's plenty grippy as well. It has that ovular shape to it that feels a little bit more naturally in the hands. Other things, you have an adjustable stem. You're gonna be able to put this up or down. Same with the seat. And overall, this bike is very, very adjustable for every rider height, and it also has some adjustment for riding style, like I mentioned with that suspension fork there. You have the front and rear fenders keeping the mud off you if you're commuting. The last thing are your brakes. You have the Tektro Aries mechanical disc brakes hooked up to 180 millimeter rotors. These brakes have proved their worth on multiple bikes, yet that doesn't necessarily mean that they perform the same on every single bike. Later in our review, we'll be testing these brakes out, but based on my past experiences with Tektro Aries, they work quite well. So we're gonna see if that's the case with our RadMini 4 here. Rad Power Bikes does a great job of meshing these parts together so it feels like one bike. While there are some competitors with similar components, they don't quite feel like they add up into one piece like they do on the RadMini 4. So with that being said, let's see how it performs in our tests. So one big question I had with the RadMini 4 is, how does it handle? After all, it's a fat tire e-bike, it folds, and it has a lot of weight on the rear end. Based on what I've gathered after doing a lot of miles on the RadMini 4, is it's actually kind of nimble for being a foldable fat tire e-bike. That was a little shocking to me, but that doesn't mean I wasn't happy about it. The front end of this bike seems to be a lot lighter than some of its competitors. As you heard me mention, a lot of the weight is in the rear end of this bike, and because of that, it's easier to pop up the curb and make that front end feel a little bit lighter weight and easy to maneuver. The shorter wheelbase is also nice. Because of the shorter wheelbase, you're able to lean into corners and corner a little sharper. It just adds to the snappiness of this bike overall. And from a comfort standpoint when you're riding, it feels like a good median between keeping you in an upright position, but also letting you be athletic on the bike. And what I mean by that is, if you want to get up out of the saddle and sprint around a corner, lay it low on a corner or something like that, you have the ability to do that, especially if you ride the handlebars a little lower at their adjustment. Basically, this bike can handle however you want it. If you want to be a little bit more of an aggressive commuter, slam the handlebars down and you're able to do so. If you want to go for your leisurely ride, put these babies up and you're going to be nice and upright, tootling along on the paved trail that day. I think this bike handles a lot better than I was expecting, and I think that's due to A, the short wheelbase, B, the weight distribution of the bike, and C, these awesome CST big boat tires that seem to fit this bike really well performance-wise. So with that being said, if I had to explain the handling overall, I'd call it a pretty nimble foldable fat tire e-bike. Keep in mind that's relative to what it is. This thing is not going to be a good handler or nimble compared to, say, some mountain bike or fixie road commuter without a motor. But for what it is, it handles quite well, and I was pretty impressed. We put the RadMini 4 through the ringer by testing out its battery range in 2 different tests. The first test was done on maximum pedal assist, while pedaling the whole time. And the second test was done on the lowest pedal assist level, while pedaling the whole time. On our maximum pedal assist test, we reached 31.86 miles, with an average speed of 19.7 before the battery finally died. On our lowest pedal assist level, we reached 53.47 miles, with an average speed of 14.1 before the battery finally died. Our findings confirm that the RadMini's battery lasts quite a long time, especially on the lower assist levels. On top of that, the watt meter helps riders moderate power output while on their ride. Alrighty guys, we are to the infamous hill test. This hill is a little over 1/3 of a mile long and has an average grade of 12%. Basically, this hill is going to tell us if the RadMini 4 is a good climber, a great climber, or not really a climber at all. I'm curious to see how this bike does with its rear hub motor capable of that 750 watts, and also how these smaller tires and wheels roll relative to a bike, say like the Rad Rover 5 that has the 26x4. We're going to do a throttle only test where I don't pedal at all, just seeing how the bike can do with me on it. And I'm also going to do a pedal assist level 5 test where I'm pedaling with the bike up this hill. If I had to make any predictions, I would assume this bike struggles a little bit with the throttle only and does just fine with the pedal assist level 5, but I don't know until I try, so let's get on it. Well, that hill never gets easier. However, sometimes you do go faster, and that seemed to be the case on the RadMini 4 today. When I did throttle only, I got 1 minute and 29 seconds with an average speed of 12.2. When I did pedal assist level 5, I got 1 minute and 12 seconds with an average speed of 15.1. So overall, if you add up the throttle only time and the pedal assist level 5 time, this thing can move relative to a lot of its competitors. I was impressed with the way it was able to hold speed on the throttle only section. Usually that's where you see these bikes struggle quite a bit. You really feel the weight of them in those instances, and the motor seems to work hard. Thankfully, that wasn't the case at all with this bike, and it's probably because this motor is tuned specifically for the RadMini 4. Because of that, it's never out of its element, and it's going to be able to be just fine in those steep instances where you don't feel like pedaling. My main takeaway from this is that these smaller wheels actually are really good for the punchy climbs. Reason being, the motor doesn't have to stress as much from some big wheel and tire and all that rotational mass that comes with it. When everything is closer together and more compact, it's faster rolling and easier to torque with. I felt that when I was pedaling as well, And overall, I felt really good on this hill climb. I was actually kind of surprised for the visuals of this bike, what a capable climber it is. When I did the pedal assist level 5, my lowest speed was down to around 11 miles per hour, and I topped out at around 21 miles per hour. So pretty much the whole time, I was moving pretty good, even when it got steep. Same thing with the throttle. My top speed was around 20, 21, and my lowest speed was around 8 or 9. So Rad Power Bikes did a good job making sure that this motor can hang with how heavy the bike is, and I'm really satisfied with the way this thing can climb. The RadMini 4 comes with 5 total assistance levels, 1 being the lowest amount of assistance and 5 being the highest amount of assistance. Sometimes with e-bikes, it feels like level 1, 2, 3, and 4 are pretty much the same, with only 5 really showing the true capability of the bike. To see if that was the case on the RadMini 4, we took it on our 1-mile circuit test and did it with it turned completely off and then in all 5 different assistance levels. When I was in pedal assist level 1, I averaged 15 miles per hour. When I was in pedal assist level 2, I jumped up to 16.5 miles per hour. So about 1.5 miles per hour difference there. The big difference was between pedal assist level 2 and level 3, where I went from 16.5 miles per hour all the way up over 20 miles per hour on my average results. Level 3, 4, and 5 jumped up about 1 mile to 1.5 miles, and I was averaging around 22 to 23 miles per hour in my highest assist level. The main takeaway I've received from the pedal assist levels on this is that they are A, very distinguishable, and B, true to the level it says it's in on your display here. You're bound to have a jump from one level to another at some point on the spectrum, and I like that they put that in the middle between 2 and 3. Level 1 and 2 are gonna be great for conserving the battery. 3, 4, and 5 are gonna be great for flying around town like we all love to do. With that being said, I do think Rad Power Bikes did a good job distinguishing these pedal assist levels, and anyone who jumps on the RadMini 4, I believe will feel the same. So with every fun bike ride comes a point where you're going to need to hit the brakes, whether it's to go around a corner a little slower or to avoid hitting a kid that ran out in the street. Regardless of what the situation may be, you're going to want to make sure these brakes work well. And so that's why we've set up our brake test here. I have a few cones set up over a 25-foot distance, and I'm going to be hitting the brakes at the first cone from 20 miles per hour. I'm going to do this test 5 total times and take the average stopping distance it took. Not only am I going to do that, I'm gonna keep my brain open to how these brakes feel to give you guys a better idea of how the Tektro Aries mechanical disc brakes perform on the RadMini 4. Keep in mind, these are hooked up to 180mm rotors, which are quite big for a bike of this size. I'm glad Rad Power Bikes chose the 180mm rotors because the more stopping power, the better in my eyes. So without further ado, let's get up to 20 miles per hour and see how we stop. Alrighty guys, so I just finished up those 5 brake tests, all from 20 miles per hour, and my average stopping distance ended up being 18 feet and 3 inches. I was hoping I'd stop below that 20-foot mark, and thankfully I did. Overall, these brakes are solid. They're not the most powerful, but they're plenty powerful in the sense that they're going to stop you on time, and if you want to lock them up to make sure you're stopping fast, they're definitely going to be able to do that. I did notice having that 180mm rotor. The bigger the rotor, the more modulation you're going to have in the bite from the caliper and the stopper, or the faster you're going to stop. I think Rad Power Bikes did a good job stocking this bike with the 180mm rotors. Reason being is 160 I don't think would cut it for safety reasons. With the weight of this bike, I think 160mm rotors just wouldn't slow it down on time. So the 180mm rotors are a pro in my eyes, and I think a lot of consumers are going to like these brakes just fine. They're about in the middle of the pack as far as our stopping distance, but that's about what we'd expect. These mechanical disc brakes check all the boxes for safety, power, and modulation for me, and I think they will for you guys too. Alrighty guys, we are finishing up our day testing the RadMini 4. It was a hot one today. Thankfully, this bike does quite well keeping the rider comfortable, which was very much appreciated for the 95 degrees or so it is today. My main takeaways of this bike is all the components mesh together very nicely. Sure, this bike has some of the same components as some of its competitors, but the way it all adds up into one bike definitely feels different than some of these other bikes. The 750 watt motor with 80 Newton meters of torque was definitely a pro in my eyes. Having so much torque there is a game changer when you're going up a hill with just the throttle, and it's only going to boost you even faster when you're pedaling with the bike. I was impressed with the way the RadMini 4 was able to climb hills. I think there's something to these smaller wheels being easier for the motor to rotate. And I think this bike is going to be good for just about anyone who doesn't want to be held to one type of riding. This thing is great for cruising around your local paved trails, picking up some groceries at the store, or exploring the campground if you want to go see what's on the other side of the campground. I think they do a good job making it feel like you're not on a foldable bike when riding, which is very much appreciated. You can tell it's folding visually, but when you're on it, it feels just as solid as a fully rigid frame, and that definitely helps show how safe this bike is relative to some other ones. Not only that, they do a good job making this clamp pretty low profile. It's out of the way, it doesn't hit you in the knee when you're pedaling, and I think this system for folding up the bike is very well thought out. So overall, this is a great bike for those who want to casually ride just about anywhere. With that being said, my name is Pierce with Electric Bike Report, and I do appreciate you guys watching my reviews. I want to hear what you guys think, so be sure to leave a comment below and let me know what you want to see me reviewed next. I have a more detailed written review in our description, and be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video. I review a lot of these electric bikes and love to compare them, so be sure to subscribe for future videos. With all of that being said, I'm gonna ride home on this RadMini 4 here, and I'll see you next time.